Well, just earlier we spoke to Ron Goucher, the AIIA, about the Senator Jane Hume appointment for Minister for Digital Economy. But they are not the only group who is calling upon the government to do more. Another group is SeedSpace, who has written to the Senator to help create a fintech hub here at home. To tell us more, we are joined by Cathryn Lyall. Hi, Cathryn.
Hi, Elliot.
Now, look, I believe that you've written to Senator Jane Hume, and it might have actually been before her appointment as the Digital Economy Minister. But just tell us a little bit about what you guys are calling upon the government to do.
Yes, thanks, Elliot. So we have written to Senator Hume and also additionally to Senator Bragg, and we've also been supported by Fintech Australia with some additional written submissions. Essentially, SeedSpace is an early stage venture capital limited partnership. So we're one of a very small handful in Australia, and we invest in very early stage firms in fintech in Australia. Having just completed our full unconditional approval as an ESV-CLP in Australia, which means we've raised the minimum 10 million, we've been able to give some very qualified feedback about the whole process, but also with the goals of the ESV-CLP in the first place. The government's been very supportive and in recognising that competition and innovation is really important for our economy going forward. And in the Prime Minister's speech at the Singapore FinTech Festival recently, he was very encouraging about the role of fintech in that. But in order for fintechs to flourish, they really do require capital, and that's one area where Australia lags versus our global peers.
So is capital really one of the main hindrances to this existing in Australia already, or are there some other barriers that are stopping it?
There's actually a series of barriers, and in our submission we made 4 or 5 recommendations specifically around the ESV-CLP program, which will help us deploy capital more readily to early stage firms. Some people may not be aware, but for instance, the ESV-CLP program expressly prohibits investments into businesses that are operating in financial services, in banking, in businesses that provide capital to others, in leasing, anything to do with securitization and insurance. There were some exemptions added in 2018, and the intention was to allow investment into fintech with those amendments, but they were very ambiguously written and they haven't actually worked because it's so ambiguous. It's very difficult for the ESV-CLPs to really make clear investment decisions. So at the moment we're languishing a little bit. So we would recommend that those finance-related activity tests be revised. And that's something we put in our proposal.
And Cathy, what's the opportunity for Australia here if we do revise these rules and I guess allow a bit more investment into these fintech-related technologies? What's the opportunity?
We don't have to look very far to see what the opportunities are. Certainly in the UK, the government, after the global financial crisis, spent a lot of time and effort and resources investing in the innovation sector, and it's there for all to see the results. The level of VC investment in Australia as a percentage of GDP is very low. In 2019, it was around 3.4%. So that ranks us at 22 out of 37 in the OECD. To put it in context, in the US, it's over 60%. In places like Israel, it's over 35%. And crucially, at that very early seed stage investment level, it's disproportionately very low in Australia. So ausbiz investments tend to be over 70% of that later stage. So the really seed, startup, early stage space is really missing out on these much needed funds. And it's a real challenge for startups as they navigate that sort of fintech valley of death, if you like.
Now, Cathryn, we've actually had Senator Hume on the program before. If she was listening, or if we get her back, what would be the one thing that you would want her to think above all else, I guess, when it comes to fintech and what it needs to thrive?
If I could have 3, that would be great. But first of all, I'd thank her for her support because she's been very supportive and a great listener for the ecosystem. But I guess our 3 big things would be to, we recommend that we create a more comparable environment to overseas, that we up the game, if you like, for early stage investment here in Australia. It would be great to see a harmonisation of the ESV-CLP and ESIC tax offsets, because at the moment they're different and that's confusing. As I said, we'd like to see that finance-related activity test to be revisited. And I think the really big one for us is we've got this great sovereign wealth fund, the Future Fund here in Australia. And if they could be given a mandate to direct a minimum proportion of their funding to early stage fintech sector through Australian VCs and otherwise, that would not only mirror what's happening with our peers elsewhere in Singapore, UK, and the US, but it would be a huge boost to the ecosystem at that early stage.
Well, Cathryn, thank you so much for joining us here on Startup Daily. Have a great holiday, and hopefully we can catch up with you in the new year when those changes start being enacted.
Thanks, Elliot. Have a great Christmas.